and keep this OER Institute into high gear.
Yeah, I got the recording going. We're now being recorded. And just as a reminder, these will be available afterwards. These recordings will go out as an email to everybody who signed up. So whether you're here or not.
Whether you're here with us this morning, this Saturday morning, thank you all for taking the time to invest on a Saturday into OER. This is day 2 of our OER Faculty Institute, brought to you by Clover Park Technical College. Today we have a lot of really nice presenters coming up to talk about open education resources and open education practices. A quick rundown of the agenda for today. We are going to start in just a couple minutes here with our keynote speaker, Jenren Wetzler from Creative Commons. And I will talk about her more in a minute. But after her, we have Charity Davenport coming in to talk about what she did with the ESL classroom and how she made her own OER resource for that. Then we've got Whitney Boswell from Green River College and Amanda Chin from Green River to talk about Pressbooks. We'll have a short lunch break. Then after lunch, we'll have Delmar Larson come in from LibreTex. And then to finish off the day, we will have a breakout discussion to talk about everything OER related. So I hope you all are excited for today. And I think we should just go ahead and get started. So today we are going to start with our keynote speaker, as I said, is Jenren Wetzler. Let's see here. I'll give you a quick little introduction, and then I'll pass it over to you, Jenren. I'll go ahead and stop my share. So Jenren has been a tireless advocate for OER. Hold on. That threw me off. Okay. And a key figure in developing the communities around Creative Commons. She is here to discuss CC professional development programs, the OER community, and innovations such as AI in the OER arena. So I will especially be listening carefully for the last part. And it looks like I can see your screen, Jenren. So let me make a quick note that if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we will try to address them in a timely manner. If it's something that we can do, or if it's something, any of the other speakers, maybe they'll address it either as they're speaking, or if there's time for a Q&A section at the end of each presentation, then maybe we can address the questions then. But other than that, Jenren, it is your time. Go ahead and take it away.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor and a privilege to be here and to get to chat about some of my favorite topics. So thank you also, everyone, for showing up on a Saturday morning when you could be sleeping or something else. I love being around the open education community for that reason, because there's so much passion. So hopefully by the end of this, we will have a chance to talk about CC, talk about what where we are with AI, but also please, let's make this a conversation wherever possible. So I'm going to try to keep my remarks a little bit shorter so we can have Q&A, but also if there's anything that I say that doesn't make sense or that you have questions about in the moment, feel free to interrupt and just ask questions in the chat or unmute. So I will dive right in. I recently attended my grandmother's 99th birthday with dozens of family members in an old historic house in the middle of the woods in New Hampshire. And I don't know if you've ever been in the woods in New Hampshire, but we all got covered in ticks. And at the same time, she loved being surrounded by a herd of her children, her grandchildren, and her great-grandchildren. So you can actually see my 2 kids. They're the 2 on the green chair on the right. Anyway, it got me thinking about the amount of change that she's seen over 99 years, and looking at the change in technologies alone was astounding. My grandmother, Mary, used to use a shared landline or a party line, and these were the norm before rotary phones caught on. She also witnessed the invention of TV, polyester, payphones, pagers, music videos, the internet, the rise and fall and the subsequent rise again of the dot-com economy, the Human Genome Project and cloning, antiretrovirals, and huge strides with cancer research. Google's, SpaceX, Bitcoin, flip phones, Blackberries, I don't know if anyone remembers those, and then cell phones becoming more than just tools to call and text people, Wikipedia, Mozilla, Internet Archive, and so much more. Thinking about all of the cultural paradigm shifts that my grandmother's generation has faced, how much change that they've experienced from World War II alone, with war shortages and innovations to compensate like superglue, it was astounding. If our era is any indication, there were likely periods of social growth and expansion and connection building, as well as periods where people felt they needed to just batten down the hatches when dealing with the tumult of change. I expect different groups in her generation had different reactions of expansion and retraction simultaneously, depending on their vantage points. But one of the developments in our US technical history that I'm most pleased and biased about was the birth of Creative Commons. So many of you and I remember 30 years ago, the internet was still a relatively new thing for most people. And at the time, there was this tremendous sense of opportunity for sharing and connection. Access, sharing, and reuse became extremely easy. People reveled in the sudden promise of free, unfettered knowledge and cultural exchanges. And this marked a phase of growth, a sense of abundance and expansion. But traditional copyright norms meant that any creative work online was either all rights reserved for the copyright holder, or it was in the public domain with no rights reserved. And in 1998, Congress extended the duration of all rights reserved copyright protection for creative works from what was previously the duration of the author's life, already a long time, plus an additional 50 years after their death. Now it became life of the author plus 70 years. So despite this unprecedented time of optimism, sharing online, and connection, people's legal ability to access, download, share, and adapt work was more limited than before. Creative Commons was born out of this heightened social friction between the newfound freedoms and potential for sharing online and the increased limitations of copyright. This tension culminated with a legal battle that actually went all the way to the Supreme Court, called Eldred versus Ashcroft. The lead petitioner, Eric Eldred, ran Eldritch Press, a website that published rare and out-of-print books for online audiences that otherwise might not have had access to them. As soon as a rare book would fall into the public domain, Eldred would publish it online. And the public domain, as you probably learned yesterday, is considered the vast pool of human ideas, creativity, and knowledge that's unlimited by copyright restrictions and restrictions from other forms of IP law. We rely on unfettered access to the public domain, as well as our limited access to work, still protected by copyright and other intellectual property rights, to develop new innovations, build new forms of knowledge, and express new iterations of creativity. I have an example that draws from an analogous space. So free access to public content has enabled things like GPS or the Global Positioning System. GPS is an innovation which the federal government has granted the public free access to, or at least one level of the GPS or positioning service called the Standard Positioning Service, which is a little less precise. Just think if we didn't have the right to reuse, adapt, and innovate upon SPS, or this version of GPS. We wouldn't have Google Maps, QR codes, many of the automated agricultural processes that allow us to choose anything that we need from grocery stores. We have meal delivery services like Grubhub, dating apps, fitness trackers, and so many other services. So a quick caveat on this, the government's offering of GPS to the public likely falls under patent law rather than copyright. But the public domain of culture and knowledge are kind of like GPS in some ways. Even though they're the sum of many people's works rather than an offering of the US federal government, we want them to be used to be productive and something upon which people can innovate. Anyway, Eldred had planned to include Winnie the Pooh and Hemingway's 3 stories and 10 poems on his site when their copyrights expired in coming years. But given the recent copyright term extension, access to the works that should have entered the public domain was withheld for an additional 20 years. Extending copyright protection arguably limited the public domain and undermined the public interest. And now at long last, Winnie the Pooh is in the public domain, and we have this new slasher flick called Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. So well worth the wait. So CC licenses help creators choose how to share their works rather than being forced into this either or situation of all rights reserved or no rights reserved and in the public domain. CC licenses allow creators to choose some rights reserved depending on their preferences. We did this by unbundling the permissions copyright traditionally keeps bundled and reserved for the creator or copyright holder as a way to incentivize creativity, and giving those permissions to downstream users. So depending on what the creator wants, downstream users will be able to work with their the creative work accordingly. CC licenses allow creators to share their work with everyone everywhere, and they're meant to help people collaborate and contribute to our global shared commons of knowledge and culture. Oops. So that all was 20 years ago. Since then, we've seen incredible advances in collaboration, ethical sharing, and innovation with CC licensing. CC licenses have become the global standard for open licenses and have been applied, along with our public domain tools, to over 2.5 billion copyrighted and public domain works online. And that's generally considered a conservative estimate. Because of CC licenses, we have over 60 billion Wikipedia articles in over 300 languages freely available to the public, helping people learn about the world and share knowledge. And thanks to CC licensed Wikipedia articles, the cycle of innovation can continue. So I'll mention two kind of Internet of Things examples with a slight caveat, but things like Siri and Alexa are possible because of Wikipedia. So we're seeing this kind of ripple effect, starting with open licenses, extending to other platforms, and so on, which kind of demonstrates the power of openness. And I say Siri and Alexa are kind of caveated because a lot of people raise the point that they can be extractive of the commons. They can use Wikipedia resources, but make attribution to the authors hard to find and drive no traffic back to the communities. So CC licenses also power our current work to open up knowledge institutions, ensuring critical knowledge and culture is available to the global community in responsible ways. Here are a couple examples from our open climate, open education, and open culture programs, but it's worth noting we have many other programs that I won't get into today, from our movement for a better internet to our open journalism work to our copyright and policy work. So we recently launched the Open Climate campaign with partners. And as we all know, climate change and the resulting harm to our global biodiversity is one of the world's most pressing challenges. The complexity of the climate crisis needs multidisciplinary research to understand and inform the global, national, and local actions. The Open Climate campaign promotes access to research and was built on the belief that if we are to collectively solve or even mitigate climate change, the research, data, educational resources, software, and so on about it must be openly available. So my colleagues are going institution to institution to open up that research. We also have our open education program, which I get to work in, which supports opening access to education, focuses on advocacy and capacity building efforts to maximize the benefits of open education, from content to practices to policy. So we get to work with a global community in our open education platform in particular, supporting open education activities around the world and collaborating. We also offer a range of trainings and courses to invest in our global community of advocates, train them in open education and open licensing. One example is our CC certificate program, which offers in-depth courses about CC licenses, open practices, and this ethos of what it means to share in our digital commons and our multiple commons, in fact. So these courses are core to CC's work and are used to train our colleagues around the world, from educators, librarians, open culture professionals, advocates, and more. After graduating the course, we've heard multiple people say that they become the point person at their institute for open licensing and engaging with existing open licensed works. And so far, we've graduated 1,459 participants from over 65 countries. So we're quite proud of that program in particular. We also work in the open culture space, recognizing that cultural heritage institutions such as galleries, libraries, archives, and museums connect communities to their past, providing resources and services for education, research, and the arts. So CC supports these institutions, making their collections as openly available, shareable, and reusable as possible to the public. Using CC licenses and public domain tools, over 1,000 institutions have opened access to millions of cultural artifacts, empowering people to learn and grow from their collective cultures and pasts. So suffice it to say, Creative Commons represents one development in our technical and creative history, of which I'm extremely proud. I want to share a couple other examples on how openness has fueled social growth and connection building before I talk about AI. So hundreds of thousands of American women are diagnosed with breast cancer each year, including one of my family members and a friend. Over 500,000 American women undergo breast biopsies each year. And even though most biopsies discover benign masses, women still have endured significant pain, time, scarring, and radiation exposure, let alone the high costs of biopsies in the past. In the 1990s, NASA scientists partnered with the National Cancer Institute, researchers from the University of South Florida and Stanford University School of Medicine. Through collaborative research, NASA applied technology developed for the Hubble Space Telescope to a different kind of digital imaging for biopsies. So through this collaborative research, they were able to look at new non-surgical and much less traumatic breast biopsy techniques. And the innovation of stereotactic biopsies, or this kind of digital imaging plus X-rays, saves women time, pain, scarring, money, and radiation exposure now. So this and so much more innovation is possible because NASA believes in the power of sharing for our mutual progress. They offer the public access to copyrighted research and public domain research. One more government example. So fast forward a little bit, for 8.5 years, I worked at the State Department under the Obama administration. And I think about that administration's optimism in our collective human potential and the huge strides in collaborative efforts that were made because of it. In my mind, this was a phase of expansion. Much decision-making under the Obama administration was premised on the power of openness, this belief in our connectivity and the belief in the need for openness. So there were countless collaborations and projects to further openness in the public interest, such as a collaboration, actually multiple collaborations with the humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, which conducted crowdsourced, and still does conduct crowdsourced open mapping that effectively helps global aid efforts addressing humanitarian disasters. So OpenStreetMapping was used with the State Department to address the spread of Ebola, to provide relief for natural disasters like floods, tsunamis, and earthquakes, and more. That administration also created data.gov, or now resources.data.gov, which was a central clearinghouse for open data from the federal government, as well as many local government and non-government open data resources. They also kickstarted something that I really admire, which is the Open Government Partnership. This started as a pact among a small number of national governments to increase transparency in governance, increase the information and output from governance, and also the collaboration that was possible with civil society to improve governance. So what started among about 5 federal governments in 2011 is now a collaboration of close to 200 national and local governments, thousands of civil society organizations, and citizens. It's resulted in nearly 500 OGP, or Open Government Partnership commitments, that have significantly opened access to information about governments. And it's credited for helping decrease corruption, protect civic spaces, especially in increasingly authoritarian contexts, and increasing access to public resources. And in that expansion of openness for the public interest, we also have to include NASA's work, which I keep coming back to with examples. So in 2014, NASA debuted a plan for further increasing access to research. We see the ripple effect of those moves towards greater openness expanding our collaborative potential today. Last year, in fact, the Biden administration put forth the public access memo, which now officially requires federally funded research to be publicly accessible without any embargo on their free and public release. So this came on the heels of 2 pandemics, which drove the point home. Traditional closed publishing models for federally funded research were downright negligent, especially in the face of widespread avoidable human suffering. Openness was the path forward. So there have been social contexts inspiring greater collective optimism and social connectivity amidst change, where it seems we've trusted in the power of our collective humanity in our decision-making, and plenty of other contexts that have elicited distrust and fear and a retraction from each other. And the pandemic era has given rise to a retraction phase, in my opinion, for a lot of reasons. We were focused on battening down the hatches and just protecting our own for a while. And after survival, many of us, our groups and our organizations are likely still in recovery mode with less outflowing collaborative energy and perhaps more decision-making that sometimes comes from a fear of loss at times, which is natural. So these personal, cultural, and technological circumstances change, but change has always been and always will be our constant. Of course, the input, decision-making, and reactions to change are far more complex than any abundance or fear of loss paradigm, but I often find that it's helpful to distill my own experience of change in these terms when charting my own course, so I can know where my motivation lies and see where I want to go. So a colleague shared this Audre Lorde quote recently: "When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid." I like to think of that and think of each shift, whether I perceive it as seismic or not, as being an opportunity to feed the sense of abundance or fear of loss. And I see the best decisions I make as those coming from and also fueling strength, both including an acknowledgement of the challenges, so not just blind optimism, but also a hope in our human connection. So Creative Commons has also been charting our course amidst the current cultural and technological changes, most lately being artificial intelligence and machine learning. We've held community discussions with creators, artists, publishers, policymakers, legal experts, and developers of AI. We've heard AI defined as a more sophisticated version of autocompletes, that might be my favorite definition, to the next generation of Creative Commons, cool, to the pending apocalypse of humanity. We've learned about the challenges and pain points where AI seemed like likely to further entrench our current exploitative power structures. And I'll talk about those in a moment. For better or worse, many people see the change AI offers us as not only irresistible, but already out of the gate. There's no turning back on development around this. So do we approach the change we see AI bringing more from a sense of abundance or fear? On one hand, we are acutely aware of the pain creators are experiencing with their works being used as ingestion data points for machine learning. Artists' helplessness as their artistic styles are replicated by AI, enabling people to create works in these artists' personal aesthetics. When creators' works have been ingested for machine learning, the outputs provide no form of attribution. This gives us serious pause. The rights of authors vary among copyright jurisdictions, creating uncertainty over what is required legally for reuse of a creator's works, though in most jurisdictions, it's likely to fall under an exception or limitation to copyright, such as fair use in the US. But even where training AI does not legally require any sort of acknowledgement of the creator of the works, many artists still feel robbed of their dignity as their art is being ingested by AI for new creation without attribution. We've also seen the challenges AI poses to everyday workers. So everyone from journalists to software engineers to lawyers tend to stress and fear about losing their paid labor in AI. Content users as well. So given the biased input informing what AI generates, when the dominant data points about the world primarily come from privileged white men's input online, the world AI reflects back to us is coming from those biases. Our current public resources in the commons as well. So you think of Wikipedia articles, for example, resulting from others' generosity and belief in sharing. Think of what might happen to Wikipedia if AI remains solely extractive from it. Will people help build and continue to maintain this globally created, refined resource when they have their own personal AI assistant? We also think about the environment, namely the high carbon footprint required to maintain data centers around the world, which run large-scale AI platforms. As we feel the effects of climate change in our daily lives more than ever before, it seems worth evaluating. And then people's private data. As these technologies scrape the internet, people's data is being harvested without their consent. The New York Times had a report on this last month. I know it's in the news everywhere. Even our expectations for fair use of copyrighted content are challenged. And this challenge I actually think is a good one. So I'm just going to open it here in case anyone is curious. Let me see if I can move this over. I can share the link afterwards as well, but there's a Texas Law Review article called Fair Learning, which is phenomenal. In this, Mark Lumley reminds us that fair use is about more than just transforming copyrighted works into new works. It's about preserving our ability to create, share, and build upon new ideas. In other words, it's about preserving the ability to learn, whether the learner is a human or a robot. So he further notes that machine learning systems copy works not to consume the expression copyright law protects, but to get access to the facts or structures copyright law already dedicates to the public. So what does this mean? If courts were to rule that the process of machine learning and extraction of, all of the data points online didn't fall under fair use and actually infringed copyright, then technically we would all be copyright infringers. All humans use the same process to learn. Beyond the legality, we also recognize that there's an increased dependence on AI, which could be a risk in the future. We need to be able to function without total dependency on different forms of AI in our lives. What happens if we lose access to the internet or our systems are hacked and so on, and not to come from fear. But there was also a recent AI impact study that showed half of AI researchers giving AI at least a 10% chance of causing human extinction, which is pretty significant. I fully recognize that this statistic is probably best taken out of context like this, just for fear mongering. But when I first heard it, I reacted with kind of a wide-eyed sense of panic. And then when I heard other experts subsequently talk about how it's really not realistic to worry about that and the reasons why not, I felt that kind of fight or flight response abate. So I think right now is a particularly volatile time for understanding AI and what's to come. There's so much change that will be coming. It's hard to make any one claim right now. Furthermore, we've been exploring the ways which technologies and associated practices can help people build on and contribute to our shared commons of knowledge and culture. So how AI can stimulate new creativity and learning and foster better sharing of creative works. Creative Commons has talked to a lot of developers who see using open licensed content for AI training aligned with their own values and aspirations. Some are exploring options for a machine readable tag or statement that creators could affix to their works to opt out of or opt into AI ingestion, which seems like a pretty worthwhile endeavor. Spawning.ai is an organization that's building opt-out tools for artists and has collected 1.4 billion image opt-out requests so far. Many creators are using AI to empower and to create things that they didn't actually know how to create or for which they didn't have the resources to create in the past. So we've learned about incredible possibilities for, of AI for performing medical diagnoses with far greater precision, to enabling teaching assistants, learning activities, and instructional design. We've also learned of an imagined future or a predicted future, I should say, where every creator has their own intellectual property rights assistant, or even a CC licensing management assistant powered by AI. In this future, I spoke to a copyright lawyer who also is heavily involved in AI, and my former copyright professor. And he had this idea that artists and creators would be able to set their default CC license preference when they're working with their AI assistant. And then basically have it automatically apply to every work that they created over the course of their day. So they would be able to automatically affix it to their works rather than manually doing it all the time. So what does this mean for education? Our open education movement, or really movements, plural, has evolved over time, where we may have started with a focus on OER as the bedrock of our US movement. We know that open education is more than just the open licenses. It's about the open policies and practices that empower learners and educators' agency. And it's about including all learners and educators, about supporting them in co-developing generative and meaningful processes of learning that ideally offer something of value to their wider communities. Over time, I've seen the US open education movement deepen its commitment and engagement with an inquiry into open practices. In conference and small group discussions, publications like Open at the Margins and countless other collaborations, educators have unearthed the same power dynamics and same reflections of injustices in education that prevail in our other systems and against which other social justice movements fight. From colleagues like Stacey Allison Casson, we've learned how all knowledge management institutions, from museums to universities, perpetuate some colonial injustices to oppose. Where we may have once thought of the label of openness on our resources was a demonstration of doing the right thing, we recognize that our work and resources are inextricably linked to larger systems of knowledge management that reinforce traditional sources of power, which no single label of openness can fix. Opening access to and engaging with education includes a continuous process of improvement, of being able to evaluate our assumptions and explore more inclusive, empowering practices. I imagine the new landscape of machine learning offers us no different option on that front. First, there are incredible opportunities machine learning can create for learners in particular. I recently listened to this podcast interview by Reid Hoffman. He was interviewing a Wharton School professor of entrepreneurship, Ethan Mollick, and they were starting to imagine how easy it would be in the near future for all students to have their own personal assistants of AI to tutor them, to improve their writing skills, inform them of how and why they made a mistake on an exam. They asserted that what we need is not a retroactive approach banning the use of AI in education, but to lean into it, to think of how we can all ensure this vital service is available to everyone. So simultaneously, I also imagine that this new AI enhanced learning landscape will likely be as entrenched in the same power structures as we're currently experiencing. So where do we go? So while the playing field continues to evolve, and we understand that, what we stand for remains the same. This is true for open education as much as it is other open movements that CC supports. We support empowering creators' choice. So we support author-centric or human-centric values that empower these creators' choices. We support inclusive practices for different perspectives and experiences, different voices in the commons that we share. Engaging more with these voices that are traditionally excluded from mainstream media coverage, power structures, and the policy debates is critical. And transparency. Our CEO, Catherine Styler, notes, open source efforts can help grow the commons, improve transparency in AI, and democratize access to the technology. We also support resource sharing that serves the public interest and builds a shared commons. So sharing that is contextual, ethical, inclusive, and sustainable, the opposite of extractive. CC's working towards clarifying how the legal structures supporting the commons, including CC licenses and legal tools, interact with generative AI today. We're looking at evaluating how CC can collaborate with builders and innovators who share our values and vision for generative AI in the public interest to develop, test, and potentially co-create solutions that tackle challenges like transparency, credit, consent, and choice. And raising public interest considerations in negotiations around AI policy. We're also engaging our global community to develop and refine our shared understandings of AI's impact on the commons. Within the domain of open education and AI in particular, how that might look might be somewhat simple for now. We might just continue encouraging CC licensing. I could see encouraging teachers to CC license instructional design products created with AI, just as much as encouraging students to CC license their creative works, which have also used AI as the latest tool. But beyond creating new OER, let's continue collective work and inquiry into open educational practices. This could mean bringing transparency into our processes of teaching and learning that utilize AI in order to help others. One example. Currently, AI requires prompts, really a conversation of prompts, in order to generate something that's useful to its users. More of the kind of power users have developed a series of prompts that generally are not as shared. Teachers who find good prompts and processes for their AI conversation should share these with others, like sharing recipes. Similarly, students who create useful tools and critical problem solving should be encouraged to share the ways that they've found these have found working with AI possible and useful. I'm sure there will be many new scenarios where open education practices can be applied as machine learning continues to evolve. And we may not always get it right, but we support a diverse global community of creators and believe that they must be involved in the conversations, input for regulation on generative AI, as well as the experimentation. With their expertise spanning the fields of education, copyright, ethics, technology, art, culture, privacy and data protection, and fundamental human rights, creators' input is invaluable. We look forward to future conversations and collaboration with creator communities as the field of AI unfolds. And to that end, we invite you all to join us at the CC Global Summit this year in Mexico City. So this is coming up in October 3rd through 6th. There, we will discuss AI in the Commons in much more depth. The theme for the whole summit is AI in the Commons, and we welcome the opportunity for further discussion. So with the incredible opportunities for social change that we're now exploring with AI, I imagine my grandmother taking it all in. She's seen serious change over time and how life adapts and moves forward. I imagine she might agree with me in the belief that regardless of the current topography of our tech landscape, the anticipated challenges and opportunities, we need to make our decisions based on informed analysis and also a belief or a trust, however fragile, in the abundance and power of our shared humanity. So thank you all so much. Happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Jenren. That was very enlightening. I like how you included those personal stories there at the beginning and the end to tie it all together. We have a little bit of time here. If anybody has any questions for Jenren, go ahead and pop them in the chat, or if you want, you can just hop off mute and ask her directly.
Hi, Jenren. My name's Maggie Lynch. Well, let me turn my video on and you'll see I'm human, not AI. Really very interesting presentation. I've been watching this myself because I'm an author, and there's been a lot of discussion in the various writers association and guilds about this. And I'm wondering two things. One, I really liked your discussion about opt-out mechanisms, or another thing that the Writers Guild is exploring is opt-in mechanisms by which people are recognized, where they are attributed and or compensated for whatever percentage of their work is being used as someone, goes on to take that. So that's my first question. And my second one is, are you aware of any databases that are that one can search to see that these were AI generated or AI supported creations?
Okay, great questions. So regarding your first point, I'm also so eager to see where things can go with opt-in mechanisms and compensation mechanisms as well. And I know that will be, well, opt-in, opt-out, and compensation will be one of the key kind of community discussion points that's brought up at the summit. And there will be chances to help CC think about what we do next, you know, and explore those as, you know, as options or people or organizations to collaborate with in our future efforts with AI. So yeah, I love that. In terms of yeah, your second part of the question, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the data sets. I also want to recognize that AI has been around for a very long time. We're now kind of looking at generative AI and these different you know, learning mechanisms as AI, but really we've been working with AI for, I mean, for quite a long time. So I don't know if that would influence things, but I would imagine so. I know that that has come up with conversations in our open journalism space, like what requirements journalists have for revealing the, you know, the AI processes behind some of their reporting, I think including data, and different organizations are approaching it differently. So some, they were saying that some journalists associate, or some news outlets require a no AI to be used at all. Some are requiring that there is some kind of acknowledgement of AI being used and how, and then some are requiring acknowledgement only above a certain amount and so on. But I think the other point was that questioning whether the AI generated data was less valid was kind of beside the point, at least for the journalism space and the conversations that I was in, because people weren't questioning about the, you know, the data management of humans before that. So anyway, I think that's probably an analogy. I'm not sure in the yeah, in the larger question that you were asking about data sets.
Thank you very much.
So this past spring, I taught an electronics course and an instrumentation course. And that was when ChatGPT kind of hit. And I had students struggling with learning how to hook up a vast number of experiments using microcontrollers like the Raspberry Pi Pico and Arduinos. And I welcomed the use of ChatGPT into the programming course. I figured that if you're struggling with software, you need any assistance that you can get. I'm also an advocate of open source. My computer industry would not be where it is today without open source. And besides that, these students are going to have to cope with AI, so they might as well get used to it. So I welcomed it, and I made sure that my dean understood that we were doing this.
That's so great to hear. I mean, that's, yeah, I feel like it's hard to embrace change so quickly, but that's really wonderful that you gave your students that opportunity. And I've heard of how immediately useful it can be for, yeah, for software coding, especially. So it's great. Also, I love the background, very on brand.
Well, anyone who knows me, they kind of know this is who I am. I can't help it.
I've got,
Jenrin, thank you
go ahead.
for your presentation. It was very interesting. And it's also a great way to kind of catch up on what's up over there. My question has, so you were saying that that Creative Commons supports choice, inclusion, transparency, and resource sharing in the public interest. And my question is, it seems kind of obvious that corporations like OpenAI do not share those values. And I'm curious as to whether or not Creative Commons has in any of their initiatives looking at open source versions of generative AI. Because if you're some of the, because we have these polarized responses, right? That you're either embracing innovation or you're responding from fear. I think there's a middle response of critically analyzing what the problems that some of these tools might represent. But anyhow, I'm curious to see where Creative Commons would go on open source versions of these tools.
Yeah. Such a great question. Yeah, I just posted a link to one of the organizations that I know we've been in a lot of conversations with, which is that. So there are some open source alternatives or AI companies that are more about open source. But yeah, frankly, they're the exception. So we are in conversations with some of them.
Okay, thank you.
So Chat GPT or similar things have been implemented on Raspberry Pis for personal use, completely open source. So I'm not afraid that it's going to be locked behind the glass door and only become the knowledge of the high priesthood. That's just not going to happen in today's world.
I didn't realize that they've been made for offline Raspberry Pis. That's so cool. I love what's possible, especially with open education and Raspberry Pis. One of the, not AI related, but one of my favorite organizations, Learning Equality, works with OER and Raspberry Pis for offline and low bandwidth communities all over the world.
A $35 computer has changed the world, and that was the goal. And it has. It's been around since 2012, and I was there waiting for 3 months to get my first one.
Go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, I saw your hand. If you want to go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to add to the conversation that I teach interior design, and I am trying to explore the positive from AI. At first, I was concerned, and my students generally are not. I have some strong writers, but they're not all great writers. They're visual people, and so I'm interested to see how we can use AI to generate big ideas and then pull from those huge ideas into a project that's workable, now to build. So I'm just trying to place my experience with this in the more creative realm versus going online and playing with like furniture layouts or whatever, because I know that exists, and I'm not really sure that will ever really replace a design professional. But I do see the impact that it could have, because I have a lot of big ideas, but I can't always express them visually. I do a lot. I mean, I'm pretty good, but I know there's more in my head, and I just really want to see it. So I just thought I'd put that in there as a creative. So
yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Also love the background. Very on point for your message.
Yes, thank you. You're welcome. House and garden. If anyone's interested, they have Zoom backgrounds.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the podcast that I mentioned might be of interest to you. It's called Possible, and so in it, I think one of the founders of LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman, is interviewing this entrepreneurship professor who kind of comes to the same understanding that I think you were getting at as well. So he was thrilled at the possibilities of anybody having access to kind of like a support mechanism for making their more abstract ideas, like mapping them out and using AI to like help them get through a process of I guess entrepreneurship or
design. I mean, we have a process and yeah.
yeah. I mean, the way he was describing, so okay, I think this is hopefully an applicable reality or analogy. He was saying that the day GPT-4 was released, he gave an overview in his entrepreneurship class, and by the end of the class, one student who had, I think, like tuned out had already come up with a memo for an idea that he had for angel investors, whatever. So already applied in practice. By that night, he already had two, I think, venture capitalist offers on that memo that he created using AI to like really flesh out his idea and make it happen. And by the end of the week, I might be getting the timeline wrong. It might have been like 4 days or something, but something like 60% of the class similarly had their memos out there and so on. So the possibilities of kind of distilling some of the abstract ideas into a tangible process and kind of problem solving from there seem like a great application of AI.
Yeah, I'm excited. So I'm gonna go find this. Possible is the name of the podcast.
Yeah, and I will.
I dropped a link of to the
thank you.
podcast in the chat. So if you
Oh,
want
thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Well, I'm excited. So I just wanted to share how thrilled I am. And I'm actually meeting with Ron on Monday, so we can talk more about integrating this into a fall course I'm teaching. So I'm just barging ahead. Yeah, I'm already behind, so I don't like, I don't like that feeling. So I need to have a better understanding of all this. So thank you very much. Very interesting introduction. And yeah, I liked where you went with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Jenren, I have a question that kind of relates to what Jaya is talking about, because she's shown interest in making an open education resource. And I'm curious about how Creative Commons licenses comes into play with AI generated text. So like, for example, if I met with Jaya and she wanted to make a textbook, an OER textbook about interior design, she has like the, the outline of the things that she wants to talk about. If you take that outline and use AI to kind of just fill in the content, right? You have the, the titles and all the sections like line, mapped out. If you use AI to create the content and then, then go in and, check it and make sure it makes sense and edit it and, do the back and forth dance with ChatGPT to make sure you get exactly what you're trying to get. How would that then be attributed? Would that be something that you created, or would you have to somehow attribute that to ChatGPT?
Yeah, great practical question. So first, I will say I'm not a lawyer. So I would ultimately defer to my general counsel or our counsel at CC. But currently, as the US Copyright Office understands it, AI is a tool, just like Adobe Photoshop, or just like a camera or a pen. So you would use the tool to implement your own expression of creativity, and you would not need to attribute the tool. That is my current understanding of it. I don't know. Well, second, I know that this is kind of an evolving, domain. So that may change, but as it stands right now, I expect you don't have to attribute your tool.
Okay, thank you.
But we could attribute it.
Yeah.
Maybe for the advancement of, trying to gain respect or something, from some of the people who aren't that open to it. You know, I mean, if I know, because I have, you know, I have all this material and I want to be enhancing my work. And yeah, so I feel like there's two ways to go with that. It might be an advantage to use the reference in, you know, citing the work. Anyway, okay.
Yeah. I see that more as like a norms reason rather than a technical copyright reason. But yeah, I love the idea of sharing more just in general in terms of like our process and our work and our inspiration and so on. Oh, thanks, Jeff, for putting in the copyright link. It's such a fascinating field. I love that that I get to work in this space and learn so much, because I mean, so much changes all the time. It's really, yeah, it's really a lot of fun. I learned recently that copyright law in particular is the most changing area of law, because it has to constantly adapt to different creative practices and developments and so on. So anyway.
A comment and another question that Jaya just brought up about crediting AI. I've actually seen a number of authors who will, in the front or the copyright part of their book, state that, you know, I use Chat GPT to generate a scenario that was the jumping off point for me to write this story or this novel. You know, so like you said, it's not a required thing. To me, it's kind of like also putting in the copyright page an illustrator or a cover designer that maybe it was paid work, but still you want to recognize that they were there. But then I have another question that relates to, you use that Winnie the Pooh example. Is Creative Commons doing any work with traditional publishers around works that maybe they haven't gone out of copyright? You know, it's not 75 years past the person's death, but they're not really selling a lot, you know, and having them partnering with you as, you know, if nothing else, good promotional material that they're good guys, you know, just to get more things out there. I'm thinking about myself, you know, I published 3 or 4 academic books back in the 90s, and you know, which was before, at least I didn't have a great concept of Creative Commons licensing or anything, and trying to get them back from my publisher and be able to republish those is a big pain in the butt. Even though, you know, they're not selling much. I mean, my royalties are less than $100 a month. So it's like, you know, this would be a good thing for you guys to do, is to, you know, to do that and get some kudos out in the field. So I'm just wondering if your organization is working with traditional publishers or trying to encourage them in any way.
Yeah, I am not aware of anything right now. I know we have worked with Authors Alliance in the past, which kind of works more on the publishing front. But yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, after a certain window of profit margins, yeah, it seems like there would be kind of a natural reevaluation, but yeah, that is, or there could be hypothetically. Yeah, I like that idea.
Do you know, Maggie, if I may, there's back in the day, there was a version of Chat GPT in the that was being written up in the 30s, and because you had all these radio shows coming out, right? And some of these radio shows were going like 4 days a week, you know, these serials. And it was really hard for people to figure out what was going to happen to Susie after she left the hospital, and would she fall in love with the doctor or whatever. And so this writer in Hollywood came up with this thing called Plot Genie, and it was basically an encyclopedia of pivotal plot points, and they were all cataloged as, you know, happy, sad, tragic, dangerous, adventure, all that kind of thing. And you just picked a couple of numbers at random, pulled out the plot genie, and that's what happened to Susie next week. So it feels like this. There's I get a lot of that when looking at Chat GPT and trying to look at how it handles things like plot and character. It's pretty funny. We're really not too far away from the 30s there. But look up plot genie sometime. That's
I'm definitely going to.
yeah.
Thank you, Jeff.
And thank you, Jenren. I think we're coming up on time. That was a wonderful, insightful presentation to start off our Saturday here at the OER Institute, and a nice discussion there at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Why don't we, if anybody knows how to do the reaction.